I said no shrimp cocktail, Valeria Whitmore muttered under her breath, yanking the silver tray off the deck table just as a waiter passed. This is a billion-dollar yacht, not a sports bar. A bead of sweat rolled down her temple, but she didn't have time to wipe it. The sun was merciless, the Atlantic breeze warm, and the sleek white mega yacht bobbed gently in the marina like it knew it was prettier than every other boat there. Valeria adjusted the clipboard in her arms and glanced at the catering crew scrambling around her. She didn't belong here, at least not in her mind. She was used to hotels, weddings, banquets, not billionaires and champagne fountains taller than her. But when her boss had gotten sick and dumped this last-minute job in her lap, she hadn't had a choice. "Valeria," barked her assistant, rushing over. "The main bar ran out of crushed ice, again. I swear if this party goes down because of frozen water." She groaned, then turned toward the main deck stairs. She didn't see the man coming up until she crashed into him. "Holy," she gasped as her clipboard and pen flew out of her hands and landed with a soft thud on the teak floor. Strong hands caught her by the arms before she could stumble back. "You all right?" Her eyes snapped up. The man in front of her wore a crisp white linen shirt unbuttoned just enough to show a golden tan and a hint of defined chest, sleeves rolled up to his elbows. His dark, slightly tousled hair looked too perfect to be accidental. But it wasn't his looks that stunned her, it was the way his eyes locked on hers. Icy blue, intense, and way too curious. "Yeah, sorry, didn't see you." She stepped back quickly and bent to grab her clipboard. "You're not a guest," he said, eyebrow raised. "Nope," she answered, standing up. "I'm the one making sure your guests don't end up chewing on shrimp tails while the DJ plays yacht rock." He laughed, low and smooth. "So you're the boss of the food and chaos?" "Yeah," she gave a half smile, pushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "I'm Valeria Whitmore Catering." He held out his hand. "Kieran Nolan." She froze. The name sounded familiar, because of course it did. He was the host, the man who owned this floating palace. The billionaire tech mogul her boss had warned her was charming, rich, and allergic to boring. Her hand slid into his. "Right, you're the guy with the boat," he laughed again, more freely this time. "Among other things." She let go of his hand quickly, already feeling thrown off balance. He was too handsome, too relaxed, too aware of her. "You're doing a hell of a job," he said, looking around. "I've had 5 people tell me the food is better than the Met Gala." "That's great," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Now if I could just get through the next 2 hours without anyone falling overboard, I'll consider it a win," he grinned. "You always this calm under pressure," she shot him a look. "You should see me during hurricane season." A waiter passed with a tray of mini lobster rolls and Kieran grabbed one. "I like hurricanes, they shake things up." She narrowed her eyes. "You like chaos?" "Sometimes it's the only way to see what really matters." Before she could respond, her assistant appeared again, panic in her eyes. "Val, the ice, yeah, I'm on it," Valeria said quickly, giving Kieran a polite nod. "Enjoy your party." She darted away, heart pounding harder than it should. The party was a blur of glittering dresses, clinking glasses, and rich people pretending not to be bored. But Valeria didn't have time to notice. She was too busy keeping the crew on track, managing last-minute disasters, and trying not to think about the way Kieran had looked at her like she wasn't just part of the staff. Hours later, when the sun had finally dipped below the horizon and the yacht sparkled under string lights, she stepped out onto the upper deck to breathe. The ocean was endless and dark, and for a second, she forgot she was surrounded by a crowd. "Thought I might find you up here," came a voice behind her. She turned. Kieran stood there, holding 2 glasses of sparkling water. "Let me guess," she said, taking one. "You escaped your own party. The 5th conversation about crypto broke me." She laughed, sipping. "I assumed you'd be into that. I'm into people who say what they mean and don't pretend to be impressed." She looked at him then, really looked. "You're not what I expected, neither are you." There was a beat of silence between them. The air shifted. "I meant to leave an hour ago," she said softly. "Then why didn't you?" She didn't have an answer. Not one she wanted to say out loud. He stepped closer, not touching but close enough that she felt his warmth. "Stay a little longer," she hesitated. "I'm not one of them, Kieran, I know. And you're not one of me, I know that too." She looked up at him, surprised by the honesty in his voice. "I just want to talk to you," he said, without the noise. She didn't move away. "Okay." They stood there, the party fading behind them, the ocean quiet in front. And for the first time all day, she wasn't thinking about shrimp or staff or disasters. She was just thinking about him. And for a man who had everything, Kieran Nolan looked at her like maybe, just maybe, she was the one thing he hadn't expected to find. The next morning, Valeria nearly dropped her coffee when the black SUV pulled up outside her downtown office. Its windows were tinted, the tires spotless, and the driver stepped out in a slate gray uniform that looked custom-pressed. "Miss Whitmore?" he asked with a clipped British accent that didn't match the Florida humidity. "Mr. Nolan asked me to deliver this." He handed her a cream-colored envelope, thick and weighty. Handwritten across the front in rich ink was simply, "Valeria." She opened it with a frown, her fingers brushing over the embossed letterhead. "Dinner, tonight, 7. I owe you a proper thank you." There was no address listed, only a sleek silver card with an emblem she didn't recognize until she turned it over. The Marlowe, the city's most exclusive rooftop restaurant where reservations were booked 6 months in advance, and even the water came with a sommelier. She stared at it for a long moment before looking back at the driver. "Is this a joke?" he blinked. "I was instructed to wait for your answer." She hesitated. Her mind raced through every reason to say no. She didn't date clients, especially not ones who threw yacht parties like they were Tuesday brunch. But something about the way Kieran had looked at her the night before, like she wasn't just temporary, like he was trying to uncover something real, it pulled at her. "Tell him I'll be there," she said softly. That evening, she stood in front of the mirrored elevator doors on the Marlowe's top floor, smoothing down the side of her navy jumpsuit. It wasn't a dress, but it was sleek, tailored, and made her feel like she belonged almost. The doors opened with a soft chime. Kieran was already waiting by the table, a single glass of wine in front of him, untouched. He stood when he saw her, his eyes sweeping over her once, then locking with hers. "You came," he said, pulling out her chair. "Curiosity's a powerful thing," she replied, settling in. He signaled the waiter without looking, then turned his full attention back to her. "I wasn't sure if you would." "I wasn't sure either," she admitted. "I try to keep things uncomplicated." "You think dinner with me is complicated?" She raised an eyebrow. "You own a yacht the length of a football field. You have your own monogrammed wine glasses, don't you?" He laughed, but there was something sharper beneath it this time. "I've had people agree to meet me just to pitch a startup, or to ask for favors. Or to say they've been in love with me since a Forbes article. And I'm what? A novelty because I didn't care about any of that." "No," he said simply. "You're the only person who didn't try to impress me." The waiter arrived then, delivering a chilled bottle of champagne and a small dish of truffle butter with handmade rolls. Kieran didn't even glance at the wine list. She tilted her head. "You didn't ask what I wanted." "I asked them to prepare the chef's table menu. He designed it around seasonal ingredients. I figured you'd appreciate something thoughtful." Her breath caught. It wasn't just extravagant, it was deliberate. "I didn't think you remembered I mentioned seasonal menus." "I remember everything you've said," he replied, not blinking. They ate slowly, course after course arriving like small works of art: roasted fig crostini with whipped ricotta, seared langoustine over saffron risotto, duck breast in cherry port glaze. Each bite was perfect, but Valeria was barely tasting it. She was too focused on the man across from her, who somehow managed to look like he belonged in a boardroom and a dream at the same time. "Kieran," she said once the plates were cleared and dessert arrived, a delicate lavender panna cotta topped with candied lemon peel. "Why are you really doing this?" He studied her, the candlelight catching in his eyes. "Because I've built companies. I've won lawsuits. I've walked out of interviews that made other men sweat. But last night, for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was performing. You don't know me, she said, more softly now. I know enough to want to. She pushed the panna cotta aside, her appetite replaced by nerves. I don't do this, she said carefully. I've seen too many women lose themselves in men with power. I've worked too hard to be one of them. I don't want someone who disappears into my life, he said. I want someone whose world is worth stepping into. She looked at him, heart thudding. You're used to getting what you want. Usually, he admitted. But I'm not asking for anything except your time. We can walk out of here and you never have to see me again. But if there's even a small part of you that's curious, I'm not curious, she interrupted. I'm cautious? That's fair, he said, leaning back. But caution doesn't mean you don't want something. She stood slowly, reaching for her clutch. I should go. He rose as well, not stopping her. Let me walk you out. They rode the elevator in silence, the air charged but not tense. At the valet, her rideshare hadn't yet arrived, and a warm breeze moved through the city streets. Thank you, she said finally. This was unexpected. Will I see you again? He asked, no arrogance in his voice now, just hope. She hesitated. Then, maybe. He opened the car door for her when it arrived, and just before she climbed in, he leaned in close, not touching, but close enough that she felt the warmth of him. I'm not in a rush, he said, but I'm not walking away either. She didn't answer. As the car pulled away, she stared out the window, her reflection ghosted over the city lights. She should have felt overwhelmed, uncertain. Instead, all she felt was the quiet ache of possibility, and for the first time in years, Valeria didn't want to run from it. Valeria was elbow-deep in a tray of roasted heirloom carrots when the kitchen door swung open and someone cleared their throat. I'm not interrupting, am I? She turned, wiping her hands on her apron. Depends. Are you here to complain about portion sizes or pitch a tech startup? Kieran stood just inside the threshold of the industrial kitchen, looking wildly out of place in a charcoal wool coat and tailored slacks. His presence drew the attention of every sous chef in the room, but he ignored them. I thought you said you didn't do mid-week events, he said. I don't. This one's a favor for a friend, her nonprofit's hosting a board dinner. Small, quiet, no yachts involved. I called your office. They said you were here. He stepped closer, his eyes scanning the prep table where roasted duck breasts rested beside a stack of citrus-glazed endives. You cook too? I plan, I coordinate, I fix disasters, and sometimes, when someone forgets to confirm the caterer's assistant, I slice fennel like my life depends on it. Kieran's eyes softened. You're not easy to find when you don't want to be. You surprised me, she said, setting down her knife. I wasn't expecting you to follow up. I wasn't expecting to want to. She crossed her arms, leaning slightly against the counter. What's this, Kieran? You showing up at my work, pulling me away from a 10-course meal. I wanted to see what your world looks like when you're not handling a party for people who don't know your name. Her jaw tightened. You think this is charming? I think it's real. He glanced around, taking in the flurry of activity behind her, and I think you've built something you care about that matters. Valeria narrowed her eyes. No offense, but billionaires dropping into kitchens like they're on a quest for authenticity is a little cliché. I didn't come to impress you, he said. I came because I want to understand you. She hesitated. You flew across the city for that. I canceled a meeting with an investor from Dubai, he said. So yes, that's how serious I am. A beat passed before she reached for a clean towel and handed it to him. If you're going to stand here, you're going to help. Can you arrange those microgreens without turning them into a salad massacre? Kieran took the towel without flinching and stepped beside her. Show me. As she demonstrated, his hands mimicked hers with surprising precision. For several minutes, they worked in tandem, no words, just movement. The kitchen around them bustled, but a strange calm settled between them. I haven't done anything like this since college, he said finally, carefully placing a garnish. You catered in college. I worked the campus dining hall. Paid my way through the first 2 years before the software took off. He glanced at her. Most people think I was born into a hedge fund. Let me guess, she said, brushing a smear of sauce from the plate's rim. You let them think that. It was easier than explaining I grew up in a 2-bedroom apartment over a laundromat. She paused, her fingers stilling. You're full of surprises. So are you. She handed off the completed plates to a waiting server. Dinner service starts in 5 minutes. You should go before you get drafted to wash dishes. Kieran leaned slightly closer. Come with me this weekend, she blinked. Excuse me? I'm flying to Aspen. There's a foundation gala, but more importantly, there's a lake house there I haven't been to in 2 years. It's quiet, private. A break from all this. She stared at him. You think I can drop everything and hop on a jet like it's a rideshare? I think you could use a weekend where you don't have to manage anyone but yourself. I have clients, events, a company to run. I'm not asking you to give up your life, he said, voice lower now. I'm asking for 2 days, no suits, no champagne towers, just you and me, and maybe a fireplace if you're into that kind of thing. She looked away, her fingers curling slightly around the edge of the counter. Why me, Kieran? Because when I'm around you, I don't feel like I'm performing, and every time I walk away, I want to come back. Valeria exhaled, her voice barely above a whisper. 1 weekend. His lips curved, but not in triumph. I'll send the details. She nodded once. Now get out of my kitchen before someone mistakes you for a health inspector. That night, she stayed behind after the last guest left, wiping down countertops alone. Her phone buzzed with a message from her assistant, confirming the next day's deliveries, but she barely read it. She kept thinking about Kieran arranging microgreens like he'd done it all his life. About the way he didn't try to impress her but still managed to. She didn't know what the weekend would bring. But for the first time in a long time, she was willing to find out. Snow sifted down gently over the pine-covered hills of Aspen, the flakes catching in Valeria's hair as she stepped off the private jet. The cold hit her immediately, crisp and cutting, but the man waiting at the bottom of the stairs made her forget every shiver. Kieran stood beside a black Range Rover, a navy cashmere coat open at the collar, his breath visible in the winter air. He didn't say anything at first. He just watched her approach like she might vanish if he blinked. I still can't believe you said yes, he said as she reached him. I'm still not sure I did, she replied, brushing snow off her coat. But I figured if I was going to lose control of my weekend, I might as well do it somewhere with mountains. He laughed quietly and opened the door for her. Come on. You haven't seen the best part yet. The drive wound up a narrow road flanked by evergreens, the world silent except for the steady hum of the engine. When they finally reached the house, a sprawling timber-framed retreat tucked between trees and rock, it looked like something from a storybook. Icicles hung from the eaves, and golden light spilled from the tall windows like a secret waiting to be told. Inside, the smell of cedar and something faintly spiced lingered in the air. A fire crackled in the stone hearth, and soft jazz played from somewhere overhead. Valeria walked in slowly, taking it all in, not just the beauty but the contrast. The house was warm, but it didn't scream wealth. It whispered comfort. You didn't build this to impress guests, she said. No, Kieran replied, shrugging off his coat. I built it because I needed a place to remember who I was before any of this. She stepped to the window, watching the snow fall in silence. I didn't come here with an agenda, she said without turning. I didn't come to be convinced. I know. She looked over her shoulder. Then what are we doing here? I wanted to give a space, he said. No events, no expectations, just time. Later that night, they sat on the floor in front of the fire, fingers wrapped around mugs of hot cider. She'd left her boots by the door, her socks mismatched underneath, and Kieran had exchanged his usual sharp attire for a thick cable knit sweater and jeans. Tell me something no one else knows, she said. He hesitated. When I was 16, I used to sneak into the library just to read cookbooks. Not tech manuals, just recipes. I liked the structure, the order. It made sense when everything else didn't, she smiled. So that's why your microgreen game was so strong, and you, he asked. What don't they know about you? I almost quit catering 2 years ago, she said. I was broke, burned out. I applied to teach culinary classes at a community center, but they never called back. What changed your mind? I catered a wedding for a couple who met in a soup kitchen. They couldn't afford much, but they saved every spare dollar for one perfect day. It reminded me why I started. He leaned back, watching her. You've built something out of grit and instinct. Most people don't understand how rare that is. I don't need you to be impressed, she said. I'm not. I'm in awe. She looked at him then, and something in his expression softened her defenses. She set her mug down and stood. I want to show you something, he said, rising with her. He led her upstairs to a room with wide windows and a canvas-covered easel near the far wall. I painted that the winter after my father died, he said, pulling the cloth back. The painting was abstract bold, sweeping strokes of midnight blue and copper, but it pulsed with emotion. You don't strike me as the painting type, she said softly. I'm not. I was angry and lost. I didn't know how to code my way out of grief. She stepped closer. You never told me about your family. There's not much to tell anymore, he paused. But I think that's why I built this place. I needed somewhere to put down roots again. She turned to him. And you brought me here because when I'm with you, I feel like I can stop running. She didn't answer. Instead, she reached out and gently touched the edge of the canvas. Then, without warning, she kissed him. It wasn't slow or tentative, it was honest. Raw, like something that had been waiting too long to be said. He responded instantly, his hands steady on her waist, and for a moment the outside world didn't exist. When they pulled apart, breathless, he rested his forehead against hers. You're not what I expected, she smiled, eyes still closed. Good. The next morning they woke to silence and snow piled high on the windowsills. Kieran was already up, reading on the couch with a blanket draped over his lap. She padded into the room barefoot, hair slightly tangled, and sat beside him without a word. Stay another day, he said quietly. I have clients. They'll survive. She looked at him, really looked, and saw something she hadn't allowed herself to fully acknowledge until now: vulnerability. I'm not going to disappear into your life, Kieran. I don't want you to, he said. I want to build something neither of us have to disappear from. He reached for something under the coffee table and handed it to her. It was a small wooden box. Inside, nestled in velvet, sat a single key. It's not a ring, he said quickly. It's just a key to this place. So next time you don't have to wait for an invitation. She stared at the key for a long time, then she closed the box and set it on the table. I'll keep it, she said, but not because I need a backup plan. I'll keep it because I want to come back. He exhaled, the tension in his shoulders easing as they stood by the window watching the world turn white. Valeria reached for his hand. I never planned on this, she said. Neither did I. But I'm glad I crashed into you, he smiled. Best collision of my life. And just like that, without banners or fireworks, they stepped into something real. Two people who had built their lives alone, finally choosing to build something together. Valeria adjusted the cuff of her sleeve as she stepped into the quiet of the Nolan Tech headquarters. The marble floors gleamed beneath her heels, and the glass walls offered a sweeping view of the skyline, but her attention was focused ahead on the man waiting in front of the private elevator. Kieran's gaze met hers immediately. He didn't approach, didn't speak until she was standing directly in front of him. You didn't have to come here, he said. I know. But there's something we need to settle before anything else happens. He nodded once and stepped aside, pressing the elevator button. Neither of them spoke as the doors closed, but the air between them vibrated with anticipation. They entered a conference room on the top floor, not the sterile, impersonal kind. This one had floor-to-ceiling shelves lined with books, a long oak table, and a massive painting of a storm breaking over the ocean. She walked to the window without waiting for him to speak. I got a call this morning, she said. From the board of the Whitmore Culinary Collective, his brow furrowed. You didn't mention them before. They're a nonprofit I've been trying to fund for over a year. They support inner-city culinary programs. I pitched them a partnership last fall, but they turned it down. Said I didn't have the visibility. He tilted his head. And now they're offering me a seat, full funding, press coverage, all of it. Kieran watched her carefully. You think I had something to do with it? I know you did. I didn't ask them to offer you anything, but you made a donation. He said nothing. She crossed her arms. Why didn't you tell me? Because I didn't want you to think I was trying to buy your success. I saw what they were doing. I believed in it, that's it. I fought for that opportunity, she said, her voice low, on my own. And you still got it on your own. They wouldn't have offered it unless you were the right person. All I did was remove one obstacle. She studied him for several seconds. You don't get to fix things behind the curtain, Kieran, not when it's my life. I wasn't trying to fix it, I was trying to support it. She turned away, exhaling. I don't want to be someone who gets pulled along by someone else's influence. He crossed the room and stood behind her, not touching, but close enough for her to feel the shift in his breath. Then don't be, he said. I'll never ask you to follow my path. I just want to walk beside you while you make your own. She closed her eyes. You make it hard to stay angry, good, because I've never been more certain of anything than I am of you. She turned to face him, her voice quiet now. I don't want to be an exception in your life, Kieran. I want to be part of it. You already are. They stood there for a moment, the weight of the conversation settling into something new, something solid. I'm going to accept the board seat, she said, but I want to build the partnership on my terms, no favors. No whispers? Then that's exactly how we'll do it, he said, and I want to keep running my business, no matter what happens with us. You should, it's brilliant, you're brilliant. She stepped closer, her expression softening. You're not what I expected. I thought you'd be all power and charm and no substance, he raised an eyebrow. And? You're not charming enough to get away with being that arrogant, he laughed, and this time when he reached for her, she let him. His hands settled at her waist, hers at his chest, and the kiss that followed wasn't about heat or hunger, it was about certainty. 3 months later, the Whitmore Collective launched its first urban kitchen project. Valeria stood at the ribbon-cutting ceremony, flanked by local journalists, community leaders, and her new board colleagues. She wore a navy coat and a proud smile, her fingers laced with Kieran's as cameras flashed. You okay? He whispered. I'm more than okay, she replied. I'm exactly where I want to be. Later that night, they returned to the lake house. Snow had melted into a soft spring thaw and the trees had begun to bloom. They sat on the back porch, wrapped in a blanket, the lake glassy and still before them. I bought the property next door, Kieran said suddenly. She turned to him. Why? So we can build something together, not just a life, something real, a retreat, a garden, a school even, whatever you want. She tilted her head. You planning to propose with real estate now? He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small velvet box. Her breath caught as he opened it. A ring, delicate and elegant, sat inside. I'm not proposing with real estate, he said. I'm proposing with every version of my future that has you in it. She stared at him, her heart hammering. I fell in love with you the moment you told me to get out of your kitchen, he continued. And every moment since has only made me more sure. You're not exactly low maintenance, she whispered, tears in her eyes. Neither are you, that's why we work. She didn't even look at the ring again. She just threw her arms around his neck and kissed him, deep and certain. When they finally pulled apart, she said, yes, the answer is yes. A year later, they were married on the bluff overlooking the lake. The ceremony was small friends, family, and a handful of students from the culinary program who insisted on baking the cake themselves. The vows were simple, but no one who witnessed them doubted their depth. Afterward, they danced barefoot on the deck under a canopy of string lights, laughter echoing across the water. Valeria wore a dress she designed herself, modern, bold, and entirely unique. Kieran couldn't stop looking at her like she was the most extraordinary thing he'd ever seen, because to him, she was. They didn't promise perfection. Only honesty, only choice. And every morning after that, whether they were in a penthouse or their lakeside home, wrapped in blankets or dressed for boardrooms, they chose each other again and again. Because in a world built on power and noise, they had found something quiet, something real, something that would last.